I just feel like it's a very community-driven conference. It also has a lot of quality, and people are just nice. Hi, my name is Sarah, and this is Asian Conf in Dornbirn.
Amazing venue. Austria is beautiful. Meeting all of the people in the community and getting to go and hang out and ski.
Hi. Right. And it won't just be any kind of live coding. There is a little bit of dependency on the network, so fingers crossed that'll go OK. So yeah, let's build an app for iOS, Android, and web. We're going to use React for that. And oh, got the wrong one up here. Let me just grab this remote. So I'm going to be switching between the slides and this thing. This thing's not playing. Cool, no video playing. It was a fun GIF, doesn't really matter. In fact, it's not even updating at all on the slides. We got our initial technical difficulty caused by maybe the network. Not where I expected it. There we go. OK, maybe videos are a bad thing on this connection. So first thing we're going to do for this app is actually get an idea of what we want it to look like. So I'm using excalidraw.com, which a couple of people here have contributed to. I know Jared and Max, I saw them on the contributors list. It was created by Christopher Shadow, who's one of the guys that created React Native. And it's just this little sketch drawing tool for doing quick mockups in the browser. So our first screen in the app, we're going to make this thing called image share. We'll have like a little banner image. We'll have some instructional text, and then there's going to be a button there. When we press the button, it should show us a list of some photos that we have on our device, and we can pick a photo or cancel it. Once we pick the photo, we can see the photo inside of our app and outside of the picker UI. And then we can press this button that says share this photo. And when we press that, this overlay will come over, which you're probably all familiar with, just whatever the operating system overlay is for doing sharing on the platform that you're using, and give us options for sharing with our friends or whoever. So the first thing we need to do here is initialize a new app. If everyone or a few people even have installed Expo CLI, you can do Expo init image share. If you're using Snack, just go to snack.expo.io and you'll get a new thing there. And it's important to start it with the tunnel connection while we're here at this conference, because on a lot of networks, you're not able to connect to other devices on the network. So it's kind of basically uses this thing called ngrok to make your machine accessible anywhere on the internet. So it's a little bit slower, the result of using tunnel versus using LAN or localhost. But thanks to fast refresh, which Ricky mentioned earlier, you pretty much only pay the cost when you do a full reload of the app. Otherwise, it's quite quick. So we're going to do that. And in fact, I skipped that part specifically because I didn't want to run yarn or npm install on this network while I'm here. And you can hopefully do that in the audience while you're watching, but it's a little more stressful when you're waiting for npm to install on stage. So I'm not going to do that. So what we get basically is this when we initialize a new project. It's a little bit different on Snack. You can just delete any of the other nonsense that's unrelated to the stuff you see here, and just have this view component with some text inside of it, and a few little things that we'll look at some more in a moment. So I'm going to run Expo Start here. I'm actually just going to use localhost in this case because I'm going to use a simulator. I didn't want to ask people to try and get simulators or emulators installed. It's a lot trickier potentially than just installing the app on your phone. But it's quicker as well if you can use the simulator. So that starts the server up for us. It's starting up this thing called Metro Bundler, which is like Facebook's version of Webpack. It's used by React Native in order to bundle your app. It actually also starts Webpack because we use Webpack for the web side of things. So once that starts, we see this thing with the QR code. So you can scan that from your phone. You can also open the developer tools. This is just another UI for using these terminal-based developer tools that some people prefer. I do not, so I will close it. and open up the iOS simulator. So that's opening up this Expo client here and connecting. And it's loading. OK, so we have this thing. I initialized the project using the blank TypeScript template. But if you're not familiar with TypeScript, you can just use the regular blank template. It's just kind of handy to get the auto-completion features that VS Code gives you if you're using TypeScript. So let's jump back to this. So this is what we have currently. And we're going to just update some text so we can see it change. We're going to change the built-in text to this one. And just to note that on future slides, anything that's highlighted in yellow will be something that's changed from a previous example. And if it's not highlighted at all, you can just assume it didn't change. So let's jump back to this one. And I'll increase the font size a little bit for you. OK, and so we can see this side by side. Let's close my memes folder. Let's get that there. OK, so now when I save it, OK, that took a second, but yeah, there we go. So we have our first change to the app complete. Let's jump back to the slides and see what we have to do next. Oh, that's very comparable size, actually. That's working well. Cool. OK. Oh, yeah, I'm on the wrong one. Thanks, Sarah. So we're going to look now at styling this text. I think most people here have web development experience, so this will look kind of familiar to you. But if you don't worry about it. We're just going to be typing things based off of what I put up there, and you don't have to stress about not understanding it. That can come later. For now, let's just do this stuff. So first thing we need to do to make this a little bit readable, I'm going to just move this to another line. I would use prettier to do that, but I just want to make it a little more clear. So I'm going to set the color. Let's jump back, my bad, to 888, and font size to 18. OK, so two things here. Again, if you're not familiar with web at all, you're probably at least familiar with hex color codes. So this shouldn't be too new for you, I hope. The name of the property to set it is just color. Font size, if you're coming from the web, you'll see that it's camel-cased instead of snake-cased. So all of the styles are very similar to CSS in the browser, except they're typically the camel-cased version of that. Another thing that might stand out is that there's no unit on font size. And that basically just, you can think of it as pixels. And that kind of just factors in for you the density of the display. So you don't have to worry about that. Oh, I hope that didn't just disconnect. Let's find out. Oh, yeah, still there. OK. So the next thing we're going to look at is adding images. So there's this logo file that we're going to download and then put it into our project directory and load that up. We put this in something called the assets directory. So you're probably familiar with this term already, but if not, just to clarify, an asset is basically like any, I mean, it can even be the code, but like image, font, sound, video, anything like that that you include in your project beyond typically the source code that runs it. So bit.ly/share logo. I was surprised that this short name was available, but it seems like still a lot of names available on Bitly. OK, this is not working particularly well. That's fine, because I can just open it from another directory. Oops. Or can I? Well, I have these two. Maybe I do need this one. And there we go with internet connectivity. I'll come back to this in a second. For now, I'm just going to use this icon asset for our image and just call it logo. So I'm going to put that here. I'm going to say keep both and call it logo.png. OK, now we can go back to our code and have a look at how we're going to implement this. So once we have this file in our project, we need to import the image component from React Native. It's one of the primitives that is built into React Native to basically accomplish the most common sort of tasks that you need for building an app. Some of them that we've seen so far, right? We've seen text and view. Image is another primitive that's just widely used and therefore included in React Native. It's the thing that other things build on top of. And we need to also import the logo image. So we can use the same kind of syntax for that, import it from the assets logo directory. And then we use the image component, give it a source of the logo, and give it some width and height style. So let's go do that here. Jump over that image. Don't forget to import it. Logo from don't have to worry about that. OK, so we have this thing showing up. This actually loaded now, so we can go ahead and save it into Brent Vatne, coding, not Expo, image share, assets, logo.png, and override it. OK, and that just fast refreshed, so it's already there. I'm just going to ignore this TypeScript error for now. It doesn't matter. OK, so that's a good first step. Similar to what I was saying about fonts, with font size 18, the same applies to the width and height here. They translate on web to pixels, and on native to some notion of something that you can think of as pixels, but it's more appropriate to points is usually the name that it's referred to as. Another thing to factor in is that there are no M's or rems in React Native. So if you use that, there are just other ways that you need to implement that programmatically currently. Another way we can use images is by just providing a URI to a remote image resource, so anywhere on the web. So this should be very familiar if you've used web before for images. The only difference is that you have to actually explicitly say that it comes from this URI. And if you're not familiar with the term URI, you could basically just treat UI and URL as the same thing. Technically, there are some small differences in the definition, but as far as usage in React Native and Expo goes, just look at whatever the documentation says, and you'll be fine. I'm not going to change that here because I don't want to add another dependency to the network. We'll just move ahead to the next thing. So the app is getting a little bit messy in terms of our styling. We have a few things that are styled inline, and so let's just clean it up a little bit so it's kind of easier to read. We're just going to move some of these styles out into the style sheet create call, give them some names, and then also kind of clean up the appearance a little bit, add a little bit of margin so that it's a little more properly spaced out. Because if we look at the app right now, right, there's a little, you could use some space between the logo and the text. I mean, we're not trying to build the nicest looking app here, but we can at least take one small step towards it. So I'm going to copy this over, and we'll just call this styles.instructions. Jump down here. OK, I use prettier. I lied. Oh, sorry, this is instructions. That's logo. Logo. Instruction. OK, so that's the same. And as we saw, we added a margin bottom here, which I'm just going to express as 10. And then we also use this property called margin horizontal and gave it 15 on the text. It's not actually making a difference here, but on certain screen sizes, if the text is butting up against the side of the screen, then this will help just to give it a little bit of space with the side. And margin horizontal is kind of interesting. It's actually not a property that exists on the web. There are a few things like this in React Native. There's like margin and padding horizontal, and same with vertical. And that is essentially just a nice shorthand for the usual difficult to read trick of like padding something and then the actual value and the other way around. Or like a workaround for having to say padding left this, padding right this. OK, let's go back to the slides. Now we're going to add some interactivity. So we're going to create a button. To do this, we're going to use a thing called touchable opacity. And we're going to wrap some text in this touchable opacity component and then tell it when you press on the touchable opacity that it should show an alert. The alert function here is something that is also the same API as on the web. And on iOS and Android, this will just translate to a simple native alert dialog. So let's jump over again to the code. And that's good. And save that. OK. Now we have this button, and we press on it, and it just says, hello world. So we built our basic interactivity into the app. Of course, this doesn't actually do what we want yet, but we'll look at that in a moment. So again, we can refactor this out into a couple of style properties just to clean it up a little bit. Oops. Thanks, Sarah. Styles.button. And put that there. And we'll do button text as well. And pull that up. OK, so no changes. Perfect. Let's jump over here. OK, at this point, if you haven't used React Native before, you might be like, whoa, that's a lot of things, especially if you don't have a web background or you haven't used React. I mean, there are probably a lot of people who haven't used React before. And certainly with these lights, I feel a little bit like that right now. It's quite hot on here. But don't worry, it'll be fine. We'll get there. So we're going to look now at picking an image in the app. So when we press this button, it just says, hello world. That is not at all what we want. What we're building is indeed minimally useful, possibly somewhat useless, but it's certainly more useful than just alerting hello world. So let's move towards that. To be able to do this, we're going to need to install this library called Expo Image Picker. There are a variety of ways that you can do this, but this is one that's built into Expo, and so it'll be the easiest thing for us to do. There's a lot of functionality like image picking and sharing, which we'll see later, that is not built specifically into React Native. And the reason is that React Native itself is intended to just be this like core of the pieces that you build on top of. It's the infrastructure that you need to then create these other libraries and other APIs that you use to interact with the rest of the native API ecosystem. And if it were to try to cover all the possible use cases that you could do using APIs on iOS and Android, it would just be an unfathomably large project that would be impossible to use, in my opinion. So it's nice we have this separation between React Native core itself, trying to be really good at building these primitives and giving you the infrastructure to to then extend it yourself and do these other things with it. So we're going to run expo install, and this is basically just a wrapper around npm install or yarn install, and it picks a version of the package that you're installing that is compatible with your project. So let's jump over and do that. And this is one area of network dependency, but it'll probably be fine. Yeah, nice. So as you can see, it ended up calling yarn add expo image picker at 8.0.1. So we have that, and now we can use it. So we need to import it, and then creating a function here, basically to use as our callback when we press on the touchable opacity button, and it will launch the image picker, and then it's just going to log the results. So we can have a look at what the result is when we pick it, so we know then how we can take that and use it to share the result. So let's do let open image picker async. So the first thing that we need to do is ask for permissions. Typically, a lot of the capabilities that you would use on native devices that involve interacting with files on your system or interacting with some device API, like using the camera, those sorts of things are typically behind a permission, so that not every app could just silently go ahead and have a lot of capabilities to wreak havoc on your system. So we can do that by just calling this request camera roll permissions async function, and then we're going to check if it's granted. As you can see, the Expo APIs like image picker all use TypeScript, so we get autocomplete on the result and on the different functions available on image picker. And we can then say permissions to access camera roll are required. I'll do a sad face on this one and return. OK, so we know at this point we have permissions to access the camera roll. Camera roll is just a name that is used, I think, primarily on iOS, actually, for the photos that are stored on your device or even in the cloud, potentially. And I guess that's a throwback for people who maybe haven't used analog cameras. There's a roll inside of your camera for film. Probably a few of you here. And then we're going to log the picker results. No, that's not what I wanted. Picker results. OK, so that reloaded. I don't know how much I trust that. Yeah, I don't. Oh, no, I should trust that. I just didn't add the callback. OK, so I need to go down here and do open image picker async. Right, it's going to ask us permissions. We'll just allow that. Oh, did I deny that? Oh, shoot. Oh, I did it wrong. Oh, yeah, good call. Good catch, Daniel. So the iOS simulator is a little bit slow at opening it at first. But we can see there's these beautiful stock photos that come with the simulator. So if we pick that, like, oh, no, we don't see anything. But all we have to do is go over here to the terminal, and we could see the result is this object with a URI that points to where this file is located at and tells us width and height and so on. Cool. So we can use that information now to display the image in our app. We already know how to show an image. We know what to do if we have a URI path to the image. So let's do that. Go over here. We need to first stash this away somewhere so that we can update the actual rendered result here. If you're not familiar with React, don't worry about it. This is just basically some way that we can manage state and update the UI. Thank you. Sarah is a lifesaver here, because I'm constantly forgetting to switch between the two. React.use state null. And we can just, well, yeah, one thing we want to do is check the picker result. So if it's canceled, because it's possible that someone will press the cancel button, and I'm going to use equals true here. Then we'll just exit. We don't need to do anything. Otherwise, we're going to set the selected image, and I'm going to call it local URI because it's the path on our system, to picker result dot URI. There you go. You can read that now. OK. And I'll format that. And now, before doing this, what we're going to do is render a completely different UI in the case where we have a selected image. We're going to return the same view that we have as our normal wrapper. We have styles there. And image source equals URI selected image dot local URI. And resize mode. And close that. And that should be good. So if I do that, go here, pick an image, choose this thing. There we go. So now we can see the image in our app. So yeah, we're getting closer to our mock-up, right? If you might remember, we had a button. We were able to press that button, show the image picker, and then see the image that we picked along with a button to share that. Yeah. Let's skip that next slide. Go right to here. OK. So sharing the image. We need to install Expo Sharing for this one. So I will just jump back here and switch over there. And that's good. And now we just use the API, basically. So import it, call it, like pretty similar sort of pattern to what we just did with the image picker. We're going to reuse our button styles to add a button for sharing the photo. So let's go ahead and do that. Import star as sharing from Expo Sharing. And I'm going to add this here. If, oops. Sharing dot is available async. So it's possible that some devices won't have sharing available. So let's check for this first and just, sharing isn't available. And then we'll return. Otherwise, we're going to do sharing, share async, selected image dot local URI. Lastly, we just need to add that button. I'm just going to copy and paste this one because it's the same thing basically. And instead, it's going to say share this photo. And instead of that, it's going to say open share dialog async. OK, thanks to fast refresh, we see that right away. I'm going to take a moment, though, to make this a little bit prettier, because I really don't like the look of this button. Let's add. Cool. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Thank you, Dan. Anyone else a member of the Church of Dan? Have you seen it? Yeah, we've got Ricky up here. He can't be the only one, I know. OK, so this is great, but we haven't really tried it on like other platforms yet, right? We haven't tried it on web or Android. I'm going to save us the effort of trying it on Android, but I am going to open it in the web browser, and let's see how that goes for us. So you can see it's starting Webpack, doing a build for us. Webpack doing its thing. Not the fastest thing, but it's happening. OK, here we go. Cool, so that's like pretty good, just working right away on web. I can now pop open the image picker, choose a photo of my dog, see that. Now I'm going to press share this photo. Oh, no, it's not available. That's no good, right? We cannot currently share on the web, which is kind of annoying because it'd be great if the code that we use to be able to do this here, if that will eventually load, to be able to do this and pop open this nice dialog, if that would just work on web also. So sometimes you hit these moments and you feel kind of like that, right? This is often what I feel like doing, cross-platform development. So how are we going to deal with this? We have to somehow handle these differences between our platforms. If we look at the documentation page for Expo Sharing, we can see that it does indeed support all of these platforms, but underneath that, there are a few warnings applying to web. One of them is that it doesn't just work on every browser. This is a fairly new API, the Web Share API, and so we need to take that into account and just acknowledge that it sometimes won't be available. We also can't share local files. Remember, I used local URI as the value that I'm storing, and we just get a path to this image on our device. It's technically possible on like the newest versions of Chrome for Android, but let's not worry about that right now. So if we look at the support for the Web Share API, it's not very widespread. And with another GIF, yeah. So web's getting a lot better, but it sometimes does feel like that. So the main limitations are it's not supported by every browser, and we can't share local files. OK. So we can just implement like a kind of polyfill for this, like a little workaround. I created this little library called anonymous sharing. I just Googled like where can I upload images for free without an API key so that I could share this easily with people. So if this turns into some weird like hacker site or whatever at some point, like it's not on me. I don't know what will exist in anonymousfiles.io in a week or even tomorrow. But it works for now, so let's do that. So we can use Expo install here as well safely because Expo doesn't know anything about this library, and it'll just go, well, whatever, I'll just pass this through to npm or yarn. OK, so let's install that and then use it. And our basic strategy here is because we can't share local files, and we know that we can't have access to the native share dialog in some situations, what we're going to do is upload the file somewhere when we're on web and get a remote URL for it that we can share with anyone on the web. And then we're going to just show an alert with the path to that and say, hey, go ahead and share this with someone. So if we go back to the picture of my dog, we can now install that. And that'll go. I'm just going to trust that it's going to work. And it just exports this one function that will just upload the file for us. There's another quirk that I should mention while I'm just writing this code with the web, which is that you actually have to, when using the Share API, do it immediately after an interaction with the browser so that people can't just pop open a share for you when you go to their site without you clicking on anything. So we're going to upload the file as soon as the image is picked rather than waiting to press the share button, because if we wait for them to press the share button and then we start the upload and then after the upload's finished then we do share, it's just not going to work. We're going to need to import this platform API from React Native. Again, this is a primitive, like something built into React Native because it tells you how do I switch between some behavior on web, some behavior on iOS, on Windows, on Android. And so we're going to just fork the behavior a little bit in this case. We know that in the case of not being on web, we can just do this. But here we need to do upload to anonymous files async picker result.local. Yeah. So we can just trust that what this thing does. Oh, sorry, not picker result. It should just be URI. Yeah. So we can trust that what this is going to do is just upload the file and then return a URL that we can go to find the image. Obviously, there's no error handling here, so if it doesn't work out, but this is a demo app, so I'm not going to bore you with try catch and retries and so on. I'll just do null here. OK, and then lastly, we need to change this so we can say the image is available for sharing at selected image.remote URI. And that's only if it's not available. And otherwise, we're going to share if we have the remote URI, we're going to share that. Otherwise, we'll just share the local one. And so now on web, depending on our upload speed, I'm just going to reload this to be safe. Depending on our upload speed, it might take a second to show, OK. And now when I share this, right, it'll say you can go here. You can tell this site's a little bit sketchy because I think it's going to open a pop-up or something as soon as I interact with it. Yeah, there we go. But hey, it works, right? So cool. So yeah. All right, we're making pretty good progress here. So now I want to have a look at some other things. So we've kind of like functionally completed the app. It does what we want it to do, but there's a few other things that we need to do before like you actually ship an app to the App Store. So you probably want some kind of splash screen, which is the thing that you see when you open the app and it shows maybe a logo or whatever before your app loads. And then there's the app icon, so the thing that they see on the home screen. So let's start with the splash screen. So you can just download this at bit.ly/splash. I'm going to copy it from that local directory because I have not had good luck right now with bit.ly. And we basically just need to overwrite rather the splash image inside of our directory. So right now our splash image just looks like this. We can verify what that looks like by refreshing the app, right? It kind of goes away pretty quickly, but you can see it's just this thing. Now if we replace it and then refresh the app, right, you can see the splash image is like that. One small problem is that we have bars kind of on the top of the screen here. And this is because the splash image is just of a certain, it's a fixed, obviously it's a single image, so there's one aspect ratio to it. And in this case, it isn't taking up the full screen. And there's no way to make a single image that is of the aspect ratio that takes up the full screen of every screen. So naturally, we need to do something to fill in the space around that. So to do that, we can get into this configuration file called app.json. So this exists in every React Native project. If you're using the Expo managed workflow, don't worry about that word. You can see it if you go to the docs, you'll see what it means. You, under the Expo key, are able to configure a lot of different properties. So one of them is under Splash. We give a path to the Splash image, which we saw already, asset Splash. Set a resize mode to contain, which just says make it fit within the screen, regardless of the dimensions of it, but never stretch the thing. Always maintain the aspect ratio. And lastly, we're adding this property called background color. So we're going to set a background color for the splash screen so that it will be black behind the image. This way, we'll go edge to edge and fill up the entire thing. So I can jump back. So open up app.json, go down to background color. A weird quirk with this one is that you actually have to use the, not the short version, the actual like full length 6-character hex code. It's just a weird thing with native colors, but anyways, we should probably fix that. You can see now that on the top of the screen, right, it's like black and it's taking up the full screen. The next thing we want to do is customize the app icon. We can kind of get a quick look of the app icon. Actually, let's jump back here by just opening up this menu. You can see right now it's currently this, but we want to change that so that it is instead this thing. So I'm just going to copy that over again from here. Let's see if it'll pick it up from caching. OK, sometimes it's a little tricky with the cache, so I'm just going to rename it. Let's call it icon 2. And there we go. OK, so we see it there. Cool. In this case, I'm just using a single icon for web, iOS, and Android. There are ways you could specify different icons. You probably want to for a real app because the shapes aren't the same, and you can provide adaptive icons for Android and so on. That's all in the documentation, so don't worry about it right now. Let's have a quick look now at the release build process. So we have this app, it's working in development. I want to now put it somewhere where people can use it. So we're going to start with web, which is the easiest one to do. All we need to do is run expo build web. It's pretty similar to doing any sort of build on a web project. Create React app or whichever tool you like to use. It'll just create an optimized build with Webpack. And as well, it's going to generate a PWA manifest based off the information in app.json. And lastly, it is going to take our icon image and create PWA icons from it. So that's done, and we could go into build web, I believe it's called, web build, bed. And I'm just going to deploy it to you now, which if you haven't used is great, but Netlify is great. AWS Amplify is great. You can take your pick of static hosting services. All right, I'm going to alias this. Well, no, I won't bother. Let's just go there. OK, so now we can go here. It's deployed. I'm going to actually open it in Safari just to change things up. And you might have noticed if you had read carefully one of the previous slides about limitations on the web that you need to be using HTTPS to use the Web Share API. And so Safari on Mac actually supports Web Share if you're using HTTPS, which I am here in this case. So now I get this dialog that allows me to choose like messages. And now it'll share the file URL, and I can just pick a recipient for it. In Chrome, it'll just still do the dialog, the alert dialog, because we don't have access to the API. OK, we're getting pretty close to 45 minutes in, but I started a couple minutes late, so I will go a couple minutes over. Sarah gives me her approval. OK, so for Android, we would basically put this in our app.json, so we need to provide a unique package name. That's just, if you've ever looked at the URL for an app on the Play Store, you'll see that at the end of it, it has a package name. So that's usually like com.whatever your company name is, and then whatever your app name is. Don't overthink it. It doesn't really matter. That said, you're stuck with it forever as long as you use the app. So think about it a little bit, but not too much. You need that balance. I'm not going to show you that one because it's kind of boring. We could do the same for iOS, except it's called bundle identifier. It follows the same reverse DNS notation. You can give it the same name if you want. And then you run build iOS. And I will show you this one really quick because it's a little bit faster than the Android one, provided that I just do a simulator build. So let's open up app.json. Yeah. And under here, I can add bundle identifier, sh agent, expo example. All right, and now I can run. I'm just going to do a simulator build. So this will do a build of the app and give us a, oh, looks like I have some transparency in my icon. In that case, let's just open up assets. That's my bad. Let's take this and crop it or something. Hopefully it doesn't complain about it being not 1024. I don't remember if we do that. Please don't validate the dimensions. We should validate the dimensions. So if we do, we actually are doing a good thing. But if we don't and it works, I'm also not mad. So it's kind of win-win here. Yeah, maybe. So it's going to publish. Oh, yeah, see, there we go. We validated it. Perfect. Great. Thanks a lot. All right. You know what, whatever. You don't have to see that. I'll show you later if you want. Or just go to the website. So once we've created these binaries, we can actually submit those to the store. And then we can update them over the air. So we can just run this command, expo publish. And this will go ahead and provide a new version of the app to the users. And so the next time they load their app, it'll be downloaded in the background. And then when they close and reopen the app, the update will be applied for them. You can configure how you want that to work. Again, in app.json, we just have some default values. They're documented there. You can also control it programmatically. So if you want to check for the updates manually when the app starts, maybe show a dialog saying, OK, there's this update available. Do you want to restart? you can do that too. Yeah, so that's about it. If you want to learn more, you can go to this link. It just brings you to the Expo docs. There's a page after this walkthrough that I basically just gave you, which is something that I just wrote up for the documentation as well. So if you didn't follow along and you want to go back through and do that, you can go to the documentation, just go to the tutorial, and you'll end up on this learning more page right after that. So yeah, thanks.